You're listening to Secrets of a Bridal Seamstress podcast. I'm your host, Nadine Bozeman. In this podcast, I'm sharing business systems and strategies specifically tailored to the bridal sewing industry so you can build your own modern and profitable bridal alterations business. Join me as I also get to chat with fellow seamstresses and share their personal success stories. I'm so glad you're here and that we can grow together in this unique trade. All right, welcome back to another episode of Secrets of Bridal Seamstress. I'm here with Heidi Thompson. She and I have been trying to put this episode together for like a year now, and we're finally together. So it's finally happening. We connected when she was working on a summit with her business, Evolve Your Wedding Business. And she brings wedding vendors and wedding educators from all around into these really cool summits. So that's how we met. And then I was like, we got to get a podcast interview going. So anyways, Heidi, so happy that you're here. And you have all the insight on how to manage burnout and avoid that. And bridal seamstresses are really good at burning out. So I feel like this is a great topic for us to cover.
I feel like there's no one better at burning themselves out than creatives in general. It's
Yes.
just like, it's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think part of that comes from like, oh, this will just take me a minute. This will just take me, like, that's probably what I hear the most from members and clients is like, oh, well, I underestimate how long things take me and I overcommit. I'm like, yeah, welcome to the club. So, but before we get into that, tell us about how you even got in the wedding industry and then what led you into being an educator in the wedding industry.
Yeah, so it's a long and winding road that only really makes sense in reverse, like many of our paths. And it's like, oh, yeah, I can see the thread there. But I started working in nonprofit events when I was in college. Really enjoyed that, enjoyed like putting fundraisers together. And I thought, and this will lead us back to marketing. I thought that the thing I really enjoyed was the event planning. And I do enjoy event planning. So I went in that direction. I learned under a planner. I became a planner myself. And I realized it wasn't actually the planning part that I enjoyed so much. It was the marketing. I just wasn't aware of that. It was like getting people to the event, getting them to care, getting them to like come take part in these fundraisers. So I worked in just about every industry there is in marketing while I was still like keeping my finger on the pulse of what was going on in the wedding industry. And at this time, I was living in the UK where my husband's from. And I noticed there was this big gap where the wedding shows, the wedding fairs, the wedding media was like still very big, fluffy Cinderella. And this was at the time where like Offbeat Bride and Rock and Roll Bride had just really blown up. This was like 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
So there was this huge gap. Nobody was doing anything in it. So I saw an opportunity to put together a wedding show that brought together the vendors who were doing incredible creative things and the couples who wanted something different.
Yeah.
And I spent
was a 2012 bride, actually. So I clearly remember the only dresses, I talk about this all the time, like the only dresses that were available were like the sleeveless or the strapless, like cupcake dresses.
Yeah.
Satin and like those pickups.
Yeah.
Glad that trend is over. But yes, so take me back to 2012. And then I did everything like we made all of our own decorations, like we did our own thing because like there was just nothing with our own vibe, like yes. So wow, totally tracking. Okay, 2012.
Yeah, so it's very much like the beginning of like on a larger scale, like doing your own thing.
And that was also because it was pre-Pinterest. Well, I think there was Pinterest, but I didn't have one. Like I didn't have Pinterest boards, so I didn't know how I could use it for wedding planning. So, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I found myself just spending a ton of time helping and coaching the exhibitors on how to like get the most out of it to get a better return on their investment. And I just had totally taken for granted all of this education, all of this work I'd done in marketing, kind of just assumed everyone else was as into it as I am. Turns out, no. So I was like, okay, I can kind of bring these worlds together.
Yep.
That's where Evolve Your Wedding Business came from, was that merging of seeing that like these people should be making way more than they're making. And they're not because they don't know how to market. They don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to get more of these clients. And that is such an important piece. And so many people struggle with it. Like if you
Yeah.
struggle with it, you're certainly not alone. Most wedding professionals do. I think most creatives do. Anyone, that gets into the business because they love the craft that they
Mm-hmm.
do really tend to struggle with that marketing side because it hits you upside the face like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you got to learn how to do all of this too if
Right,
you
right,
want to
right.
get clients.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's where a lot of even our members come into play because it's like, oh yeah, I can sew. Like I know all the ins and outs of the sewing and like how to fix the dress, but it's like, how do I get the clients that I actually want in the door instead of just
Yeah.
kind of taking whatever projects, you know what I mean, just to make it work. So yeah.
Yeah. So where most people come to me is when they're at a point of like, I don't know, I got to figure out this marketing thing. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to like book more weddings, but something I'm really passionate about and that is interwoven with everything I do is that your business can give you the life you want. It can give you the freedom you want, but you have to learn how to structure it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it will eat you whole.
Yes, which is just what we want to talk about today.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if we should start with like how to avoid being eaten whole, or what if you're already there now? So let's kind of start with like the people who are feeling like they're just treading water, like they can't get ahead. How do you fix that? Like, how do you fix that for 2025?
Yeah. So I will start this with just like a caveat that you should keep in mind through all of it. You are inevitably doing things that you don't have to do, that you don't need to be doing, that
Mm-hmm.
don't drive results. There are plenty of things that all of us can quit, myself
Mm-hmm.
included. So I am big on like getting stuff off of people's plate. But when they are initially in that state of just total overwhelm, like I'm drowning, and I can give you a worksheet for this. I have one if that's helpful for
We
your
love
people.
worksheets. Yes, yes, yes.
I
Mm-hmm.
have a worksheet fan
I
myself.
love all the
Help you.
printables. Thank you.
So you want to just get it all out. Get
Mm-hmm.
everything out of your head. Just dump everything that you are working on out. And I do this whenever I get overwhelmed.
Mm.
And then most people, if they are going to take this step, they're going to take it next, which I think is actually a little early. Scheduling. Okay, when am I going to do these things?
Yep.
Before you do that, we have to evaluate, do you even need to be doing these things? Which of these things actually matter? And when you're
Mm.
in a situation, so there's a difference between, things that give you a return on investment day to day. And then when you're in just like a straight up, I'm drowning situation, that's different. If you're in that situation, the way I talk about this is like we're all juggling a lot of balls. Some of them are glass and some of them are rubber.
Mm.
And you have to figure out which ones are going to bounce if you let them go.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's most things. It's like, is anything going to happen if you don't post on Instagram today? Is
Right.
anything going to happen if you don't post on Instagram this week?
Right.
No.
No, I'll be
No.
the one to tell you because I've been MIA in stories for the past like 3 months, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
nothing's really changing, you know?
So you have to be able to separate what actually has to get done
Mm-hmm.
and what are the nice to haves that
Yep.
I would
Yep.
like to get this. If you really get down to brass tacks, most things you don't absolutely have to do, and you don't absolutely have to do them today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you are like drowning, if you're having, like, I have bipolar disorder, this is how I learned how to manage this, is if there's one day and I like just can't do anything, I am very quick because of that at figuring out like, okay, I've probably got like 30 minutes in me. Like
Mm.
what needs to get done, not to make progress, to keep the damn ship afloat. Like
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
just to
Yes.
make sure, like, okay, I need to respond to these couple of emails. And that's like literally the only thing I will do that day
Mm-hmm.
because that is the only thing that actually
Right.
really, if we, get down to it,
Mm-hmm.
needs to be done. And I think if we can understand that, we can change our expectations. So if you're having mental health issues, if you're sick, if your kids are sick and now you don't have, the time during the day because you don't have childcare, you have to adjust your expectations and you have to know these are the things I can drop. These are
Yep.
the things I can just come back to it tomorrow, come back next week. It'll still be there. Nothing horrible is going to happen versus no, these are really actually the things I need to
Yeah.
do, which typically come down to client deliverables that you promised
Mm-hmm.
and prompt communication.
Mm-hmm.
For
So I
most
think
of
for
us,
listeners, it's like the sewing is
yeah,
like, okay, you can't like, oh, you have to do the things to get the dress out the door, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that should take priority
Mm-hmm.
in a situation where you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this day, or I don't know how I'm going to get through this week. In emergency mode, that should take priority, like the things that actually matter. Now, we don't want to operate out of that mode all the
Right.
time.
Right. So if you're listening and you're like, oh, this is just life, like I recently been talking about how I went on a vacation and like the amount of DMs that I got that were from people who were like, I haven't taken a vacation in summer in years because it's like it's just assumed that this is how you get through wedding season is to just put your head down and then you're making lots of money. So you don't want to question anything, but it should feel normal to like just live on stress fumes and just cranking out those dresses like the hour before the bride shows up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we have to really think about like, why is that acceptable to you?
Yeah, yeah.
Why, like, you would never treat an employee like that.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it okay to treat yourself like that?
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you actually get to take time off is putting that structure in. And I'm sure, how long before you took that vacation did you know you were taking it?
Oh, like months.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you put it in your calendar so nothing else could come and take
Right,
that
right, right,
time.
right. It was a priority. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. It's not
Yep.
going to be when I have time. Like you have to put that onto your calendar. And the methodology I usually teach for this is big rocks, pebbles, and sand. And this
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of you have probably seen this before. The big rocks, where this whole thing comes from, is this experiment of you have a bunch of big rocks, you have a bunch of pebbles, and you have a bunch of sand. You have to fit them in a jar. So you put big rocks, you put pebbles, you put sand, or you put sand, you put big rocks, you put pebbles. The order you put them in determines whether they will fit or not. Because
Right,
there's a
right.
bunch of gaps, there's all those little gaps in
Mm-hmm.
between. So the order they have to go into the jar, the order they have to go into your calendar is big rocks first.
Mm-hmm.
That's vacations, that's time to eat lunch, that's
Right, right.
your morning routine, all of the things that you don't want to sacrifice, that
Mm-hmm.
you want to be, your time. And the
And I
way
bet some listeners are like, wait, what? I bet they were expecting the big rocks to be like, okay, those dream clients or like work related. You know what I mean? But that is how everything just gets so convoluted and like you don't have a life outside of the work, you know?
Yeah.
So, yes,
Yeah. And that's how we end up burning
prioritize.
out is
Yes.
there's no way to like refuel you creatively. There's no way to rest. And something I've had to learn myself is that rest is part of your work
Mm-hmm.
because you can't do the work unless you have a brain that is ready to do that work. So it's part of it. It's just part of the cycle. But if you don't put those big rocks in first, of course there won't be room for it because all the little things come in and take up that space.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to feel like, oh, well, I have to take whatever will come to me, which, by the way, you can and still take that vacation. You just front load that work.
Mm-hmm.
You just
Right.
do it before you leave.
Right.
You don't have to necessarily say no to the business,
Mm-hmm.
especially as a seamstress. Like you're not necessarily having to be there at the wedding, you
Right.
know, you're doing
Right.
that work ahead of time. So that's even more of a reason to block off these periods of time for yourself
Mm-hmm.
and just, I mean, the way I do it because I genuinely love my work is I am reserving this time. If I decide to do something, I get to do that, but I am not committing to anybody else. I am not, there are no deadlines, there's nothing in there that has to be done.
Yeah.
If I decide like I want to go create a whole new website or something, like whatever, that's my time. I can do that. But I don't have that as something I feel like is on my shoulders and
Right.
I need to do like
Mm-hmm.
we do so often. So that kind of thing, those big rocks, that has to come first. And then everything else has to fit around it. So
Mm-hmm.
Pebbles comes up next. That's the stuff that actually moves your business forward. That's
Right.
strategy, that's planning, that's actually creating a marketing plan and doing your marketing.
Mm-hmm.
The things, that we back burner because there's nobody chasing us.
Right. 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 Right.
And we're all guilty of this. So don't feel bad about it. But you have to put that time in. Like there is time on my calendar when I'm working on planning for the next quarter, when I'm working on, working at a particular strategy that I'm putting together. So you have to block that time off. Or again, what makes up the sand is all those little things, all those little distractions that you feel pulled in a million different directions
Mm-hmm.
by. And if you let the sand run things, you never do the strategic parts and you
Right.
never take any time off.
Right.
And quite frankly, I don't care if you're making $1 million in your business. If you're not taking time off, I would rather not have that. I'd rather
Right.
not have the
Right.
million.
Yes. So for those of you listening, the sand is the sewing. Okay. It's all and it's the midnight sewing. Because how many friends do I know that are like, okay, you're listeners, and they're like, this is my normal routine, or like I'm starting at this time in the morning. I'm not leaving my shop till 10 p.m. And it's like if there were an opportunity to step back and like, okay, how do we, and that's what's cool is like most of the time once they're ready to work with me or like join the membership or actually talk through the things, that's when it's like reevaluating the big picture and what are the priorities and what kind of got you to this place so that we don't have to do it again next
Yeah.
year. And this doesn't have to be an every season thing. It can just be like, oh gosh, this was a rough one. Let's, reevaluate the big rocks and the pebbles because the sand is all the sewing. Like, oh, the sewing.
And
I don't
like
know.
real sand, it gets in everywhere. It's gonna
Yeah.
go in every little crevice of your time of your business that you
Hmm.
allow it to. And to your point about like the time, I think we forget that we get to decide
Right.
how we're going to work. We get to decide how we're going to run our businesses, and you have
Hmm.
to give yourself permission to do that.
Yep.
And if you want to figure out a way to make the same amount of money and work 20 hours a week, there are ways to do that, but
Hmm.
you have to make the decision. Or if you are a night person and you want to be up at night doing this stuff and you don't want to work in the morning, you don't want to work during the day, it looks different for everyone. Like
Yep.
I have clients who have kids, they want to be done at 2 so they can go do school pickup and spend the rest of the afternoon and evening with their kids. Great. Let's structure your business around your life instead of trying to jam your life into the little bitty crevices
Right.
that
Whatever's
are in
left
your business.
over when you're
Yeah.
tired and just kind of like barely getting through. And I sometimes the pattern that I see, and I'm sure you see it too, just across the board with whatever niche, your wedding industry is, we get excited with like the first few wins, like, oh my goodness, we see, okay, if I do this work or I put in this time, I make this much money. And then there's without like even like a clear goal of like, what does your monthly income even want to look like? Then we can just get caught up in wanting more and more and more and more and not realizing, okay, to get this much, this the sacrifice that I'm making. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Nothing is really decided or chosen. It's just kind of like we just keep accepting work and taking on more clients and we see it as a win, like, oh my gosh, I'm growing. This is so cool. This is so cool until all of a sudden we don't have a life.
Yeah.
How do we get here?
Yeah. And it's
So,
like, I mean, it probably sounds crass, but like, you know what out of control growth is called anywhere else in life? That's cancer. That's not
mm-hmm.
what you're going for because it's
Yeah,
not sustainable. You
right,
can't live like that.
right.
And we have to, I'm not saying tamp down your growth. I'm just saying you have to be intentional about, what do you want this to look like? What do
Right.
you want your business to look like? What do you want your life to look like? What do you want your day to look like? And I
Mm-hmm.
think so many of us have never actually stopped to think about that. And we're our own bosses. Like, we're the ones that get to
Yeah.
make that. And because we don't have any automatic structure, we just think, okay, I'll just put my head down and like work harder. And the funny thing about that is, the only point where the amount of time you put in relates to the amount of money you make is when you're an hourly employee.
Mm-hmm.
In your business, there are things that you and I'm sure, have both done that took 20 minutes, took an hour, and resulted in a bunch of revenue. And then there's things we put 10, 20, 50 hours into and nothing happened.
Right, right.
So you have to look at, like, what is the actual return on investment of your time? And a lot of times we're doing the hard stuff because we feel like, if I work harder, if I put more effort, more energy, more
Mm-hmm.
time in, I'll get better results. And often that's actually not the case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there can be a choice of who, like what kind of clients you want to work with too, which will bring in a different, a different monthly revenue and bring in different kinds of projects too, whatever industry you're in within the wedding industry, whatever kind of vendor you are, it's the same. And I think sometimes with seamstresses, because what we do is so hands-on, like it's one-to-one, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
well, there's a limit to how much I can get from each client. And I think, yeah, to an extent that is the case, but we can also be more decisive in what we're just letting in through our doors. So what I'm hearing you say is, as much as it's difficult to hear, we are the cause for our own issues.
Not in
It
society. I
all
mean,
is, yeah, and but it is. It's like we're responsible, and we're, as our own boss, we're responsible for what comes in our door and what kind of schedule we build for ourselves. And I think the sooner that you can get to that point that you realize that, like, okay, I'm the only one here calling the shots, so that I'm living with the decisions that I've made, the sooner that you can make positive changes and just have literally a different life, like experience wedding season in such a different way.
I just think we are so socialized to believe that I put X amount of time in, I get X amount of income out. And that doesn't work when you're a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look at, are the things, I just had a call with some members today about this. You have to look at, are the things you do actually having the return? That
Mm-hmm.
is so important, because I have really noticed that a lot of times the hard things I put in are not the things that get results, which is like infuriating, but also pretty awesome, because it means you don't have to necessarily like play on hard mode all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a client who, she was really focused on her Instagram, and I just recorded a podcast about this as well, because it seems like everyone's first instinct when things aren't going well is, I'll post more on Instagram. I'll work harder. I'll do more.
Yeah.
And we talked about it, and her best clients are coming from referrals from planners. So I was like, well, then why
That's,
are
yes.
we going for Instagram when
Yep.
you could reach out to these planners? In 15 minutes, she reached out to a planner who she had the intention of being like, hey, do any of your clients need this right now? She didn't even get that far because she already had a relationship with this planner. They were talking about, just life.
Yeah.
And then the planner goes, I'm so glad you reached out to me. I have someone that I think is going to be perfect for you. That took almost no work.
Wow.
And because it took almost no work, it wasn't the first thing that came to mind.
Right, right,
But strategically,
right.
it
It just,
is the
yeah,
best choice.
yeah,
It's to go and do those things that generate results for
right,
you.
right. And I think too, when we know most of us work alone, so we just don't even know what other options are. And
Yeah.
like what other people are doing that's working, that's a little bit easier than maybe what we're doing. You know what I'm saying? And so being able to kind of get your head up and connect with some peers, whether that's even just like meeting some friends for free on Instagram or joining a membership or hiring a coach or just, literally getting on the phone with another seamstress or whatever. And it's like, hey, how do you do things? I think that's super powerful to hear that it almost like gives you permission to do things differently because we don't even know there's a different way to do stuff, when we're just so used to our own routine, whether it's a good routine or bad routine.
Yeah. And I mean, as funny as it sounds, the best ethos I can have in my business and that anyone I think can have in their business is like, how can I be lazy about this? How can I find the most direct path,
Yep.
not meandering and, eventually stumbling into a client, but like, what is the laziest way that I could do this? What is the most direct thing I could do? Oh, yeah, I'm going to go check in with that planner that I love and sends me great clients and just like see how her life is going.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, is that going to turn into a client every time? No. But that is something that's such an easy lift.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we just think, perhaps because marketing has always been difficult, that it is always difficult when
Mm-hmm.
really it should be getting easier and easier as you go because you're learning what works for you, which is
Mm-hmm.
different to what
Right.
someone else, may find works. And you're doing more of what works, ideally, and you're doing less of what isn't. You're quitting the things that don't work. So you can just, you know, pull all that stuff out of your to-do list and your schedule because it's not getting you anywhere. Like,
Yeah.
let's do the things that we know are getting you somewhere. And it feels like a cheat code. It feels wrong, but it is the best way to do it. You get the best results out of it. And you wind up having a business that allows you to have a life as well, which honestly does not happen without being intentional and making
Mm-hmm.
some real decisions around that.
Yeah. So if you're in the middle of your busy season now and you're thinking like, okay, I don't want this to be my forever mode, we start fresh. I think most of us start fresh in like February, March, because we have a couple months where it's slow and then it picks up again, at least by March. So then having those big blocks or big rocks set up first, like what something that I've done with the membership that is super helpful, and it helps me just visualize like where I am now and then think of actually how I want to feel and what I want to be in the future. So writing down words that describe how I feel now or how I feel this week, like okay, I'm enjoying this project. So, okay, joy, creativity. Some people might put like, okay, overwhelm, stress, not enough, whatever. And it's like you're writing down exactly what's in your head as you're hearing it in your head, right? So you have this like list of words or list of phrases, and then you're kind of like, okay, this is the reality of how I'm feeling and like the life that I'm in the middle of right now. And then you can write down words that describe how you'd want to feel or who you'd want to be a year from now, so that you just have some of those words I think will overlap. Like it's not like your life stinks now, but you're going to see different words too in different terms, but then you'll be able to like see it on paper. Like, okay, this is who I want to be. This is how I want to feel. This is the life that I'd like to build for my family. And then you put in the big rocks based on that list, because sometimes we get so lost in like, okay, the day to day, and then it turns into a month and it turns into a season. And then it's like 5 years go by and it's like, no wonder we're burnt out, because we just keep going without lifting our head up and looking around and looking at the life that we're building. Like, is this really sustainable? So
Yeah.
doing some kind of, I know there are so many different practices to kind of envision what your business could look like or dream about what the life could look like. But I think that's a great starting point when you're thinking of how you want to start a new season. Because if listeners are hearing you say, put in those big rocks first, like sometimes it's like, I don't even know what those would be. I haven't even given myself permission to like think about what it would be like to read a book and have time to sit in my backyard, or like what would the big rocks be, so it's gonna be different for everybody. But just even having a sense of in the perfect world, what could this look like? And knowing that your decisions, you are the one responsible for the way that it looks now. And you also get to be responsible for how it can look 6 months down the road.
Yeah, that's the great thing. Like it's
Yeah.
like Play-Doh. You can shape it in so many different ways, but
Hmm.
it's also down to you to make those
Yeah.
decisions because like you don't have a boss
Right.
making them for you about when you're going to work and how much time you're going to take off.
Hmm.
I know for me, like big things, words that I want to embody, that I want to live, are things like ease, freedom, under control. And
Hmm.
I feel under control when I have things planned out.
Hmm.
So those are like the action steps I take. So I then set aside time to make sure I'm planning that out because I know I hate how I feel
Yeah.
when I'm just like constantly in response mode and like
Mhm.
I feel like I'm being pulled in a million different directions. So I you really have to think about it as like what are the guardrails you have to put in place to kind of keep you on track and not like careening over the
Yes.
side.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Okay, so what are some ways that you have, like you said, there are so many things that you yourself don't have to do. So what are some things that you've hired out for, or you've had kind of this like third party take care of for you, just to help us daydream about what we don't have to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things you can outsource is bookkeeping.
Mm-hmm.
It is just such a relief to not have to do that. And
And
I
not worry
held
that you're gonna
on,
do it wrong. Ah.
yes, I held on to that probably a little longer than I should have because I
Mhm.
was under the false sense of like, oh, like it auto imports stuff. No, it misses stuff.
Yeah, get a person
No, it
to
is not
make
that
that work.
easy.
Hmm.
So that was something that I absolutely loved getting off my plate. I think
Hmm.
if you think about things that you either hate doing or that you're not good at, that are not your marketing. Because
Yeah.
if you are going to outsource any of your marketing, you have to be able to tell that person, okay, this is the ideal client I'm going for. This is what they care about. This is what they're concerned about. This is what works. This is what doesn't work.
Huh.
Like you have to have that information. And really, you are the only one that can figure that out
Hmm.
for your business. So I wouldn't jump directly into that. Let's see, other things I've outsourced. I have a virtual assistant who handles a lot of my admin type stuff.
Hmm.
So she doesn't handle my email, but she handles a lot of like the annoying million little steps in between. Like, for a seamstress, it could be like, okay, setting this person up in this CRM and
Hmm.
triggering this automation that's going to go out.
Yep.
It might feel like it doesn't take that much time, but when you add it up, like
Yeah.
you can get days of your life back.
Yeah. Hmm. Yes, I love that. I'm
Yeah.
currently going through like a new website process for Sweet Francis, like my sewing business. And we're in the middle of the process. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do my own copywriting, like, and then I get the worksheet because you know how you're asked all these questions to like get the copy going. And I'm like, I'm totally like drawing a blank. I don't know but then I still have this like sense of like control. Like I want to control what's on the website. So I don't want to give it up because honestly, like the add-on fee for having this person also do the copywriting was totally worth it, but it was more of the control issue for me. And so, like just yesterday, I was like, okay, I'm going to give this up, and somebody more capable than I will do this. And it's like
Yeah.
just allowing like somebody else to take over who, you can trust them to probably do it better than you, but also releasing that grip that you have on the business. So that is probably a big struggle for people who have built this business from the ground up. And it's like, this is my baby. And like, I put in all this time to make it work. And so I can't uh, give the reins to anybody else, but like what you're doing is you're just inhibiting yourself and getting yourself caught up in the mundane things that somebody else can do probably better and faster and more efficient than you can.
Yeah.
Well,
And I
for a
think
small price.
if you keep in mind that you are not abdicating, you are not, this is theirs now 100%.
Hmm.
No, it may be that you have a process for them. Like I know for me, when I have my assistant do things, I am recording a super quick Loom video. I'm like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. This is how I do this. This is why I do this. Can you run with this? And then can you come back to me? So for something like copywriting, like, can't bring it back to me. Let me review it. Let me tell you what I like, tell you what I don't like, and then you can go make the changes. Like you're still in control,
Right.
still like, you know, at the wheel, you're still
But
driving.
I'm not spending like 20 hours coming up with this copy that like is painful for me to think about. Like, yes, exactly.
Yeah. So it's, you get to basically be the editor
Hmm.
instead of having to come up with something from absolute scratch.
Exactly.
And that is not giving ownership. You're
Right.
not giving ownership of that. They're doing a task that you are coming into with certain expectations. You're also coming in with certain data, certain information. Who am I trying to reach? You know, what do they care about? All these ideal client sorts of things that we have to think about. And then they're taking that and putting it together and coming to you and checking, okay, am I on the right track? Is
Hmm.
this aligned with, you know, something you would say, something you wouldn't say? So you're still getting to check the pulse, you know, throughout and getting to have your input and make sure it's the way you want it to be. But that doesn't mean you have to, you know, do it from scratch.
Yeah.
Like if you were cooking and someone like made the cake batter and was like, taste this, tell me if
Yeah.
this tastes right. Yep, go.
Yeah,
Then
exactly. I like that.
you're not the one doing it, but it's
Right.
following your recipe.
Exactly. Yes. So there's so many different avenues that that example could fall into. So, yes. Okay. So, with the title of our podcast, Secrets of Bridal Seamstress, what is your best kept secret as a entrepreneur? And you already gave us some pretty good ones about like time management and like how not to, die in the middle of your business. But any other good secrets you can spill the tea on?
Nobody has it all together. Nobody.
Good one. Yes. Yes.
So if you feel like the only one that doesn't have it all together, believe me, if you could see the back of everyone else's businesses, like I get to
Mhm.
see, nobody has it together. Even the
Mhm.
people who come across as the most put together, as the most organized, as, you know, that's their front facing, it's still chaos
Mhm.
sometimes. And
Mhm.
it still all falls apart sometimes. And it still makes you want to cry sometimes. So you shouldn't expect it not to. You shouldn't expect it
Right.
to be perfect and seamless because
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
really, while it should get easier, I really don't think that exists. It's just
Right.
always like a new fun problem to deal
Yes. Yes, exactly. I love that because I think yeah. I remember when I was still teaching and I had an administrator who, okay, well, okay, this is like a total non-wedding related, but still related to people not knowing what they're doing, right? So we had like a new, what's the word? Evaluation system that rolled out for teachers. And so like we would be so nervous about it, talking about it in the staff room, like, oh, this new evaluation. It was called TPEP. Ugh, thinking about it, I'm like, and come to find out, it's also new for our administrators who had to evaluate us in a new and different way. And I don't know, something happened to me. I remember sitting at lunch and it was like a revelation. And I'm like, wait, he doesn't know either. Like he's making stuff up to evaluate us, quote unquote. We're trying to figure out what we should be like saying and including in our slideshow and how to prepare the kids to like, check off all the boxes. But it's like this guy's kind of making stuff up too. And it was like this huge mindset shift for me because it was like, nobody knows anything. And then that was the year that I quit teaching because it was like, well, if I'm going to be making stuff up here, like trying to fit in the classroom, I'm going to make stuff up in my business. And do you know what I mean? Like if I'm
Yeah.
going to have the same feeling of like, okay, nobody knows, then I'm going to go kind of do my own thing since nothing's guaranteed anyway. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like we're all just and kind of acknowledging that this person who was, my boss and for, 8 years, 9 years, I was thinking like they kind of had it all together. And then it's like, they kind of don't though. It was very freeing. So, and also when you know that, you're more apt to like ask for help or like share your insecurities with your peers or like be more vulnerable because nobody has arrived. You know what I'm saying? We're all just like, okay, here's a new struggle. Okay, here we go. How do we navigate this? So
Hmm.
some of us have like more solid resources that we can share, but none of us are like, oh yeah, been there, done that,
Yeah, it's not
know
like
all the things.
everything's perfect now.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
everything goes exactly to plan. Like that's not how life works. That's not how anything works.
Sorry to disappoint you. Yes, exactly. Ah, okay, so tell us about Evolve Your Wedding Business, so your summits, your membership, how listeners could get a hold of you, and like what do you have going on next down the line here, the next few months?
Yeah, so you can find everything I'm doing over at evolveyourweddingbusiness.com. You can find the membership there, which is the Wedding Business Collective. It's really a roadmap to help wedding professionals book more of the weddings they want, but also build a business that gives them flexibility and freedom and time because it doesn't have to be this like 60-hour, 80-hour a week thing that it really can become
Yes,
sometimes if
easily.
we
Oh yeah.
don't, yeah, if we don't really take control of it and take it by the reins, it can just go have a whole life of
Mhm.
its own.
Yes. So if you're like, "Ooh, I love this topic. I want more." Now you know where to find Heidi. So go, binge listen to that podcast and you definitely have just this very like Zen content. So if you are into this episode, there's more where that came from. So we know how to find Heidi. Okay, and we got to get you in the membership. We got to get you to like
Oh, we should do
something.
something.
I feel like there's so many we got a whole list. So we'll meet you in there as well. Okay, listeners, you know where to find Heidi and you know where to find me and thank you for tuning in. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and share this podcast with a friend. And if you're feeling really generous, leave a review. Thanks, everyone.